I mean, it sounds dramatic, but I think it could change the world.
Mm.
If we learn to actually listen, we're so bad at it most of the time. And we hear what we want to hear, or we selectively listen, or we jump on the first thing the person talks about, or we assume we think what they're talking about.
This is Chocolate and Coffee Break, a compassionate proposition, a space to share stories, bridge divides, and spark meaningful connections. So grab your chocolate, pour your cuppa, and let's break down barriers, one conversation at a time. And now, here's your host, Andrea Putting.
And welcome to Chocolate and Coffee Break. I hope you're ready to go for another episode of Chocolate and Coffee Break. So today I have a guest, and what I want to ask, what kind of person do you want to be when someone you care about needs help? Now, this is a question, it's very confronting, and it is one that Ross Judd asked in his transformative book, Listening, A Guide to Building Better Connections. So on today's Chocolate and Coffee Break, we're diving into the messy, vulnerable moments where words aren't always honest, but the heart is still crying out to be heard. Ross invites us to listen beyond the spoken word, to create a space so soft, so safe, so compassionate that truth can finally emerge. And this message aligns closely with what this show is all about, because here we believe that chocolate and coffee is more than comforting rituals. They're bridges to empathy and understanding, to those brave and beautiful moments of human connection. So I'm looking forward to sharing with you and Ross's great book, Listening, and what we can learn from that. So grab your cup, unwrap something sweet and settle in, because this episode might just change how you show up when it matters the most. So welcome, Ross. It's lovely to have you here.
Thanks. I'm delighted to be here.
Awesome. So when I start the show, I like to start with one of my questions, a bit of a heart-opening card questions that I have. And I know this one, when I pulled this one out, I thought, this is a perfect one to start this show, because I know where this is going to go. So the question is, what is something that has happened that changed the way you see the world?
Aha. And the fact that you know where this is going to go tells me you've read my book. Because the thing that happened was a conversation with my daughter. There's been lots of things that have happened that have changed my view of the world, just by the way. But in this specific context, for this, for what I've done with this book and what I'm trying to do with this book, there was a moment with my daughter when she was roughly 10 years old. She came and loitered in the doorway of my office, and that was unusual behavior for her. She normally would wander in and take over my keyboard or climb on my lap or do whatever. And so I decided to be quiet and silent and engage with her, because that just seemed like there was something bothering her. Now that conversation evolved, and she started talking about kids at school being mean to her. And I had to resist the urge to get in and dig in and find out who the kids were and what were the teachers doing about it and what were their parents and who were the parents and I need to talk, etc. And I decided to stay with her and let her guide this conversation. I learned this concept and these ideas, and I felt like this was a time when I needed to apply them. So I did apply them, and as we worked through the conversation, she opened up more and more, and I summarized what she was saying and fed it back to her more and more. And then eventually she started asking me for ideas and suggestions on what she could do. Now, the bit that struck me was that each idea that I gave her, she'd already actioned it or thought about it. So I'm like, should we talk to the teachers? No, I don't think that's a good idea. I think that might make it worse. Okay, all right, she's thought about that. So there were, 2 or 3 ideas that I suggested. She'd thought about them, but we kind of got to the point where I was running out of ideas, but she wanted more. So she asked me for another idea. And I suggested, well, let's ask your mum. Your mum's pretty smart. Let's ask your mum. And she reacted badly to that. No. Please don't tell mum. Please don't tell mum. No, dad, please don't tell mum. And that was a shock, because her mum was a very supportive, empathetic, understanding, but something wasn't quite right. So that conversation then started to evolve. And it was that transition from talking about an issue that she seemed to be on top of to an issue that she suddenly was very nervous about. That really was the transitional moment for me, because I'd learned all of these concepts, but in that moment, I realized actually these concepts are real and it does work this way, and they don't tell you the real issues straight away, and they do audition you with another topic. And if you hang in the conversation and let them guide the conversation, which means being silent, not asking all the questions that you want to ask, not taking over, not trying to action plan or problem solve, you'll dig, you'll be able to dig a bit further and get to that deeper issue. Not dig because you're not asking questions, just you'll get to that deeper issue. So to cut a longer story short, the issue there was that her mother had been sort of playfully teasing her about things. And in their normal day-to-day, that didn't really matter. But in this moment, when she needed to talk to someone, she felt like she couldn't talk to her mother. And that was what was really bothering her. So as we explored that, we finally got to a solution where I suggested she talk to her mother. She wasn't comfortable with that. So we went backwards a bit and came back through. And then finally I suggested, look, I'll go talk to your mum and I'll let her know how you feel. And I can remember her saying, do you think you can? And almost laughing. But then I found her mum and was able to express what was going on. And my daughter Emily had followed me down the hall, and they were in each other's arms. And it was a beautiful moment. I still get a bit choked up 15 years later, thinking about what that moment meant to our family. But the transition for me was I'd learned a lot of these concepts and I'd taught them in corporate workshops in leadership, teaching people to listen and get to that deeper issue. And suddenly I had an experience that was so deep and profound that it just cemented all of it for me. And that probably kickstarted me thinking about, is there a book in this? Should I be thinking about that book? And 10 years later, I actually started writing it. And 2 or 3 years later, I finally produced it. So that was a bit of a long-winded answer. I'll try to be more succinct.
That's okay, but it's an important story to stop, for us all to stop and think about, do we really how do we get to the core of what someone wants to talk to us about, what that issue is? And as someone who has had teenage children, my children are well and truly grown up now, dealing with what would have happened if you weren't able to get into that problem then? Because my mind went back this morning. I remembered my sister never understood that my father was joking. She went through her whole life not understanding that, and how. So, what do you think as far as that goes? What would difference that made to Emily and your whole family?
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot, because I wondered the same thing. What would have happened if she hadn't had got that connection that she needed from me that day? Because she wasn't going to go to her mother to try to have that conversation. So then if she didn't get what she needed from me, if I'd been Action Jackson, if I'd been because I was actually working at the time, she loitered around my office. I was doing some work. So I could have been a bit dismissive, or I could have, are you okay? If I just said, are you okay? She would have said, yeah, I'm fine. But clearly her behavior was suggesting that was not the case. And yeah, what would have happened if she'd grown up not able to connect with me or her mother? I mean, Emily did a podcast with a friend of hers in her 20s. And in that podcast, she talked very openly about being someone who, in her words, suffers from anxiety. So she feels anxious a lot. And quite often we have conversations about the way she's interpreting things and the anxiety that she feels. So someone who's got a predisposition for feeling a bit anxious, growing up through her teenage years, not having that solid foundation that she needed with both parents, where would she have turned? Where would she have gone? How would she have felt? Look, I worried about that so much that I explored the idea of, can it lead to the feelings of isolation and the feelings of loneliness and separation that can actually contribute to someone starting to feel suicidal? And I know that's a long stretch, and I know it's a long gap between one and the other, but I was working on a mine site as a consultant, and I met a guy who'd lost his teenage daughter to suicide, and he and I became friends, and I was asked to coach him. I'd met him 6 months after he lost her, and I was asked to coach him, and they told me the background, and I'm like, I can't coach this guy. He's in grief. So I just decided I would go in and I would listen. I would apply everything. And we've actually become really good friends out of that. And I shared the book with him, and I asked him for his opinion on, do you think that level of separation, and am I right to draw a link here? And he's become a massive supporter. He's written a foreword for the book. And his answer was, Ross, it's a hard thing to admit, but there is, all sorts of things could come out of missing these opportunities. And that's what I worry about. Suicide's like I'm taking it way too far, but all the little bits of separation, can be problematic.
And we're just going to take a quick chocolate break while we listen to our sponsors, and we can subscribe while we're doing it. While we're having our chocolate, listen to the sponsors. Don't forget to subscribe.
When I hit perimenopause, all I heard was doom and decline until I took a sacred pause and I went searching for women who were radiant after menopause, like Dr. Christiane Northrup, Dr. Vandana Shiva, and the late Dr. Gladys McGarry, still shining at 103. In this book, I share their stories and wisdom and the magic that menopause truly holds. 7 Wonders of Menopause is a sacred reminder. You're not ending, you're returning. Available at independent bookshops in Australia and Amazon around the world.
Did you know that only 30% of speakers are women and that only 13% of panels feature women? In order to change that, there is now a directory at womenspeakers.com.au where you can go and search for a speaker. We also have groups on Facebook and LinkedIn under the name Australian Women Speakers, where you can just go and post about your event and women will respond.
And we were just talking with Ross about how listening could help people when they're feeling really depressed and ready to go into thinking about suicide. Really heavy topic. But how do you think this kind of deep listening can open up the doors when we're having conversations with people? If we're sitting down having our chocolate and coffee with somebody, which is really about creating this safe space where we can talk about whatever we need to share. How do you think a deeper listening can help us with that?
I mean, it sounds dramatic, but I think it could change the world. If we learn to actually listen, we're so bad at it most of the time. And we hear what we want to hear, or we selectively listen, or we jump on the first thing the person talks about, or we assume we think what they're talking about. It's just such a difficult thing to do fully and well. But if we can do it, I love what you're doing, with this whole program. And if we can actually sit with people, obviously the hardest people to listen to are going to be the people that you disagree with. If they've got a topic and they say something that you disagree with, your brain is just going to go nuts, and you're going to have all sorts of internal dialogue. And getting past that dialogue to actually hear what they're trying to say can be really difficult. And the more people learn to do it, I think the more we connect, the more we understand each other, the more we understand that we have more in common than we do, in difference. That's not the right expression, but you know what I mean? So I think it can make a massive difference.
Yeah. I was actually talking to someone last night, and they said that the people that they have started off having conversations with, have the greatest conflict, have been the people that have become their closest friends.
Yeah, it's funny how that works, isn't it? And it's funny how, there's so many, I've done personality profiles all my life, and almost 100% of people, when we do a profile, I ask them what they married, and pretty much everybody marries their opposite personality style. So opposites attract. Our differences can actually be what makes us stronger. if we embrace them. And it's a concept I've been working with organizations in the corporate world for over 30 years. If we embrace these differences, we'll find a solution that actually makes us all stronger. But so many people are fearful, particularly at the moment, that so many people are very fearful of difference. But if we learn to listen and understand that person and what really matters to them, it can make a massive difference. Yeah, it just changes your perspective. And it doesn't surprise me for you to say that.
Yeah, because we need those. It's like when you're looking at something, a problem that you're dealing with, you need the fresh eyes to look at it to help uncover what you're missing. So I kind of think of that as the same with speaking to someone who's different to you, that you're bringing in fresh ideas, you're bringing in new perspectives that you can open up and change your way of thinking, change your way of doing, or you just understand that person a bit better so that you give them the space. So I really want
sorry. I was going to say, I think one of the things that stops people doing that is the concern about how hard it is. It is hard. You have to concentrate. You've got to try to get past your internal voice. And I get a lot of people, since I've released this book, I've had a lot of people saying, oh, it's all too hard. And my message is, yes, it is hard. I'm going to acknowledge that it's hard, but you're not doing this all the time. Choose your moments. So recognizing my daughter needed help, that was a moment, and I chose to work hard to listen. If you actually meet someone that you need to connect with, but they've got a different opinion to you, then that might be a moment where you decide to listen. It's not something you're going to do every day, and it's not something you're going to do anyway. So I think part of our conversation needs to be about actually picking the moments. I love the idea of a coffee and chocolate break. And that's a moment, choose that as a conversation. People deciding, let's have this conversation, I think is a great idea. And then we can concentrate, then we can listen, and then we can get the benefits of that.
Yeah. So I would love you to give some hints on how is it that we can get into this deep listening.
Great.
What do we need to do to go that bit further?
Yeah, well, I talk about 3 steps. In the book, I've actually got a process that people can follow if they recognize the opportunity. But step 1 for me is recognize the opportunity. So what I just said about pick your moments, don't be trying to do this all the time. It's just kind of crazy. And if you are trying to do this all the time, you'll become someone that nobody wants to talk to because you're too intense, etc. So pick your moments, and recognizing the moments is important. So are they behaving differently? Are there other subtle clues that they're giving you? Have they asked for your attention? There might be some hints and clues. So that big tip number 1 is pick your moments. And then tip number 2 is, once you recognize that moment, now get yourself ready for it. Try to concentrate on them, get past your inner voice, and actually focus on what they're saying. Make sure you're connected. Make sure they know you're connected. Put away your phone, put away your laptop. Do all the things you need to do to make sure they can tell you're connected. And then my 3rd tip would be summarize what they're saying. So recognize that this is a moment, connect, and then summarize what they're saying, and that conversation will evolve into something beautiful.
Great. You've got it in the 3 steps, which
everybody loves.
Yeah, because I know in your book you've got the Rio Star thing, and so people need that 3 steps that they can just stop and think and go, right, I've got to just make this time and allow us to unfold this conversation and let it happen, so that people can feel heard and they can feel seen, which to me is the whole essence of what I'm trying to present here, is to allow people to feel seen and heard in the world. So, so I'm really enjoying this conversation, and we're going to go a little bit further into listening in a minute as we listen to some sponsors. While you can subscribe, like, and comment, but please listen to our sponsors, because that's what makes the show happen.
Introducing 123 Read to Me, We give books to children who don't have books so they can succeed. Help us give away books to supported playgroups, kindergartens, schools, community events. Come and sort books. Donate money. $5 equals one book in the hand of a child. Because just one book a day creates clever, kind and confident kids. 1, 2, 3, read to me. If this interests you, let's talk.
You've ticked the boxes: career, commitments, calendar that's more packed than your pantry, but something's still missing. In Compassionate Purpose, Andrea Putting invites you to stop chasing busy and start living with intention. This book is about real fulfillment through small acts of compassion, purpose-driven service, and meaning that last. No pressure, no perfection, just purpose with heart. Compassionate Purpose, Discovering a Life of Fulfillment. Search for Andrea Putting on Amazon. So I wanted to talk about active listening. It seems like it seems a bit strange. I'm listening, but I've got to be active. I've got to be silent, but I've still got to be active. Please help me with this active listening.
It's look, I don't know that I'm an expert on that specific term. I've known what I've presented in the book. I've known under a number of different names: active listening, paraphrasing, reflective listening. And I think some of it is just people trying to put a name to their particular take on this way of listening. What I know active listening to be is you actively responding to that person with what they are saying. So I like to keep things as simple as possible. So I just suggest to people, just summarize what they're saying. Just try to make it shorter and summarize it. And for me, that's active listening. It's the action of summarizing what they're saying or repeating what they've said in your own words. And yes, the term active listening sort of suggests we've got to be doing something. The doing is actually the process of taking on board. So this idea of summarizing is much harder than you think, because you've got to take on board what they're saying, process it in your brain, and then repeat it back to them. Now, the process of doing that stops you hearing all of your noise that's going on in your brain. So often what happens is someone else will say something, a word will trigger a whole thought process in our brain, and then that's all we end up hearing. We don't end up hearing what they've actually said. And so the idea of being active about this is that we actually repeat back so that our brains are working at what they are actually saying. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Listen to what they're saying and you've got to keep focused, and that can be the hardest thing for a lot of people, especially those who are neurodivergent, to keep focused on what someone's saying and pick that up, because there's so much stuff out there.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
there's so much stuff that can take our attention when we're sitting talking to somebody, and someone else has walked in the room, and that looks like an interesting book on the shelf.
Yeah, and all of that stuff that's going on in the world is impacting our attention span. I'm pretty sure that attention spans are getting shorter and shorter, and our ability to concentrate on what someone else is saying. I mean, neuroscientists tell us that your internal dialogue runs at 10 times the speed of someone's spoken dialogue. So as you're talking, I can think of 10 other things. When my daughter mentioned kids at school being mean to her, my brain rattled through 10. I thought about my own experience at school. I thought about all sorts of things. So that is normally the noise that gets in the way. That is normally the thing that just stops us being able to hear and understand another human being. And the idea of summarizing, actually, I've personally found it very powerful, because it forces me to just hear what they're saying, concentrate so that I can repeat it back. And in that process, I successfully shut out my internal dialogue. Yeah, all of those concepts, paraphrasing, active listening, whichever you're applying, just keep doing it, keep working at it. It's a great process to be doing.
Yeah. One of the things that you talked about in the book, which I wanted to bring up, you went into talking about our values and beliefs. Now, this was interesting to me because I almost felt like I was reading two separate books,
Mm.
but they come together beautifully. Why is it so important that we look at our values of listening, which comes back to that question that I started with. What kind of person do you want to be? So
Exactly. I was going to come back to that question that you asked. So a lot of people, when they hear the idea and the concepts and they think, oh, that's a great idea, like, I need to listen more effectively, that all sounds good. It's like making a New Year's resolution. I need to do this year. I mean, how many of them do we actually end up delivering on and doing? So the gap between making a conscious decision and actually integrating that into our unconscious and our neurology so that we actually do it at the time when we have that opportunity, that's the gap I was trying to bridge with what I've called the integrated values iceberg. So it's really important to think about who you want to show up. Who do you want to be in that moment when the person you care about, we're not doing this with strangers, this is someone you care deeply about, when that person actually needs someone to listen, who do you want to be? Because all the habits you've got for listening that you've learned throughout your life are probably not going to be what you need in this moment, because most of us are terrible listeners. So you need to make some conscious decisions about who do I want to be in that moment, and the integrated values iceberg can help you do that. And the great thing about it is it works brilliantly if you focus it on a specific thing. So using it for who you want to be when you see the opportunity to listen is brilliant. It works really well.
Yeah, and once you've got it, you can use it for all sorts of things. So I looked through it and thought about this show. What was the values for this show that were important to me? And it was quite a eye-opening experience to go through that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, most people, when they do values, they'll do it with a guru who suggests do your life values.
Yeah.
And that's a good process to do. But I've met and coached a lot of people who found that hard. My values for my entire life, that's a big question. Whereas if you actually think about the values for something specific, like this show, or like being a parent, or like listening, or my sport, or my music, or whatever it might be, that actually is a more focused and has more chance of success in my experience with the people that I've coached.
Yeah. So it's a great tool.
Mm.
So how do you think we can use this process as we go out into the world and want to build a better world? So when we're sharing chocolate and coffee with someone we don't know, that we want to help to open them up into sharing their deepest stories, creating that safe space for them.
I think the combination, like I love the idea of people sharing and having chocolate and coffee. And what I'd love is for any of your subscribers who've been doing that, who've actually been making the effort to sit down with someone and have a chocolate and coffee break with them, I'd love to hear feedback about if they stop and listen more intently. So if they watch to see, is there something deeper going on? Remember this idea, they won't tell you the real issue straight away. So if I listen more intently, I've got a better chance of getting to the real issue here. If they actually make that effort to listen, did it make a difference to that conversation? Because I know from experience it will. And I know from experience we can change significant differences of opinion by understanding each other more effectively. So, I hope you get some feedback from people about applying this deeper listening in that context, because I think it's a wonderful context that you're setting up. And if we actually learn to listen deeply and understand that person, who knows what we can achieve.
Fabulous. Thank you, Ross. And if they want to know more, they can go to
rossjudd.com. And
Fabulous.
The book is available from Amazon and all the other retailers.
Yep.
There it is.
Grab yourself a copy.
Yep.
So this week, do what Ross has said and reach out to someone and listen to their story, listen deeply and see what you can discover and create a safe place for them. Because this is why we brew the change. One safe moment, one honest can change your life. So subscribe, like, and until next time, let love be the loudest voice.